4 types of organisations that currently exist to externally quality assure EPA. Ofqual have laid out their scheme, with others have yet to publish theirs. How do we avoid a 2-tier system?
Okay, 2-tier or maybe 3 or 4-tier, but a different tiered system. Tom, maybe you...
The short answer is we need a single quality assurance framework for the apprenticeship system and endpoint assessment in particular. There can be multiple players, just like there are, multiple examination centres that the DVLA has for driving instruction. You can take your choice, but the point is they're all working to a Department of Transport approved single standard, and for you and I as lay people, we call it the highway code. So that's what you're being assessed against when you go for your driving test, and that's for me what we clearly need to move towards with endpoint quality assurance, because the danger otherwise, and I agree with Sir Jerry on this in terms of what he said to the select committee. I mean, the whole nature of these reforms does actually hinge around the extent to which employers at the end of the day have confidence in the quality assurance system, and that includes the quality of the training provision, the quality of the endpoint assessment, and ultimately the quality of the end product, which is a proficient and competent apprentice, which is not only qualified to work in that particular occupation in that particular firm, but is qualified to work in the industry. And that's another big difference, I think, that we shouldn't lose sight of about these reforms. It is about ensuring people are equipped with portable, transferable, industry-relevant skills going forward, and not just being trained for a whole series of tasks around a particular occupation or a particular employer. And I think the comments made earlier about the north of 700 standards, I think the IFA's penciled in potentially, that will be signed off over the next sort of 18 months or so. I mean, that's already twice the number in Germany, 331, there's 256 in Switzerland last time I checked. I think that should be a worry for all of us in the system that are really concerned about this nature of world-class apprenticeships, that we don't by default end up with a very, very granulated, occupationally specific work-based training program, as opposed to the vision around apprenticeships, which is equipping people for the 21st century challenges that we face.
And not wishing to be a spokesman for the government, but certainly at the beginning there was all this drive for flexibility. There has to be a balance between some sort of standardisation and that flexibility that we've currently got. I think most people accept we haven't got it quite right. Very quickly, though, Tom, the Ofqual put out a big document. I got through pages 5 to 7, but not much further. In what words of once, do you think it's a good structure that they've set out?
Well, I think it's important to understand where Ofqual is really coming from here. I mean, it's all about, for them, public confidence in our qualifications and assessment system. So, of course, as the organisation that Parliament has empowered to police what public confidence should mean in practice, obviously they've taken the EQA challenge and they've looked at this and they've come up with a series of rules. And I think the other thing about Ofqual, which perhaps most people don't always appreciate, particularly if you're not regulated by them, is that they have real teeth. My members can be fined serious amounts of money if they fall foul of the the conditions of recognition which Ofqual and indeed the other regulators across the UK put in place. And potentially the system we're moving towards is, 48 of my members currently that are awarding organisations are on the EPAO register. Just as it so happens, actually, they cover the majority of standards, upwards of about 65% of the current standards. That will change, of course, as more standards come on stream. So that is already creating, a 2-tier model. It's here already. I think the challenge is, are we moving to a 3, 4, 5 multi-tiered model, which is why we've got to, I think, get a grip of this notion of a single quality assurance framework for EQA.
Charlotte, you probably deal with a number of different types of organisations that are trying to establish EQA. What's your view of that?
Yeah, so we're approved for 26 standards. I currently have 5 different EQA organisations that we're working with, and the good intention is there with all, but have different terminology, different policies, different processes, different way of monitoring us. I've in particular got one of our EQA organisations that base it on volume and sampling. So I will have them in our organisation for 2 weeks every 3 months carrying out quality assurance, which just, is that remarking, or is that actually quality assurance? And so I think, you know, there's been quite a lot of discussion actually with IFA, and they are saying they are committed to making sure there is standardisation of approach across those EQA organisations. That's yet to be seen. My way of looking at it is, could you imagine if we were in a situation where we said, instead of just having Ofsted providers, you are actually going to have different types of organisations all coming into your organisation with different views, different opinions? I don't think that would necessarily drive up quality.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think nobody likes Ofsted. No, that's not true. If you got grade 1, I suppose you like Ofsted. But you know what I mean? But we'd all accept it probably helpful to have a single organisation. We're all likely to improve, but it's sort of helpful that there's a single standard that we all work to. We can interpret differently. And I guess, I don't know, with employers, are you lost in all of this? Do you even read this stuff that comes out?
No, we don't tend to read too much of it, let's be honest. I have seen the document, the Ofqual document. I have nothing else to compare it to, so therefore I have no idea whether it's good, bad or indifferent. But I was just sat here thinking that as an organisation, we make soft drinks, we have quality standards, they are the same across the world. So why can't it just be that simple, you know, in the world of education?
I think we'd all agree with you, and as I say, in the early days, and when I worked for AALP, and AALP I guess still do, are pushing for some flexibilities. There are some flexibilities which are unhelpful. I think this is probably one pushed too far, but I don't know whether that would be your...
If only there was just Ofsted. So you've got QAA coming in doing inspections, awarding body inspections. You look at any government programme and it's filled with madness and acronyms, you know. So I think you just have to take that as read. Yeah, it's a cost, it's a burden. I wouldn't read it because you won't get anything from it, you know. And anybody who does read it, you look at the functional skills madness of EPA, yeah? Welsh essential skills, allowed or not allowed? Allowed. Scottish core skills, allowed? Not allowed. Polish English, allowed or not allowed? Allowed. Canadian English, allowed or not allowed? Not allowed. Yeah? You can spend your life looking at the madness of all of the intricacies. You just have to assume that generally those kind of things are attacks and kind of work.
Yeah, and I guess the argument there would be, it's always going to be madness, but if there's one single madness, it gives you half a chance of working your way through it. Any views on that from your perspective, both provider and...
We had, with my EPAO hat on, we had, there was no EQA when we applied to go on the register. We were then contacted by one when we were about to start delivering our first cohort of EPAs, which made us really nervous because we're like, we've had 3 months to get this together, and if you're coming with more compliance. But they were actually really helpful, to be fair, and I think it was really useful having them there and going through that process, having them kind of quality check what we were doing, quality checking our material, so it made it a lot easier to build on that. I think where you haven't got an EQA in place and some standards don't have that, although from what I understand, the IFA take that default position and then subcontract it out to open awards, I think. It can become a little bit difficult, I think, and particularly given that this is supposed to be the testing, the rigour, but those who are delivering that potentially haven't gone through that rigour with an EQA. So.
Yeah. And to be fair, just to wrap that sort of question up before we open it up, I was certainly at the initial Trailblazer discussions when employers genuinely came and many of them just didn't feel confident that the qualifications that were within the apprenticeship were real and they felt part of it. So this was an attempt to get involved. I guess we're on the low slopes of getting somewhere where we all feel confident of that. So I think there were good intentions, as you mentioned, even from the government in that respect.